The human female wasn't screaming. That should have been our first warning. But we were too busy congratulating ourselves on finally bagging one of their infamous warriors. Captain Yara Mason stood in our detention cell, hands cuffed with quantum restraints, blood trickling from a split lip, and she was smiling. Not the desperate, unhinged smile of the broken. No, this was something else entirely. Something that made my secondary stomachs clench with unease. Commander Thek-9, my lieutenant, Greeks 4, chittered through his mandibles. The human refuses interrogation. She just keeps asking about our shield frequencies. Shield frequencies. I studied the creature through the reinforced viewing port. Humans were supposed to be primitive, emotional, prone to panic. This one looked like she was planning her next meal. The Galactic Council had warned us about human unpredictability, but their reports read like fairy tales. Humans who fought with broken bones, who turned hopeless situations into victories, who somehow made the impossible look routine. Propaganda, we'd assume. How wrong we were about to discover ourselves to be. Begin standard extraction protocol. I ordered, my forearms adjusting the neural interface crown. Let's see what makes these creatures tick. Grix 4's eyes widened. Sir, the reports from Proxima Station were exaggerated, I snapped. Humans bleed. Humans break. Humans tell us their secrets when properly motivated. The detention facility hummed around us. A masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering. 16 levels deep into the asteroid, shielded against everything from solar flares to antimatter explosions. The humans had been trying to crack our forward base for 3 rotations now. Their ship graveyard outside told the story of their failures. But somehow, inexplicably, Captain Mason had made it inside. Alone, her infiltration pod had materialized in our docking bay like a gift from the void, and she'd surrendered without firing a shot. Too easy. Everything about this felt too easy. Run full spectrum scans, I commanded. Biological, technological, quantum signature analysis. I want to know if she's carrying so much as a modified tooth. The results came back clean. Perfectly impossibly clean. No hidden weapons, no cybernetic enhancements, no trace of the exotic matter humans supposedly used in their more creative warfare applications. Just flesh, blood, and that insufferable smile. Commander, Reeks 4's voice carried a tremor. She's requesting to speak with you, personally. I laughed. A sound like grinding metal that echoed off the facility walls. Requesting? She's in quantum restraints in our maximum security detention center. She doesn't get to request anything. Sir, she says she has information about the human fleet movements near Kepler 442. That got my attention. Kepler 442 was our primary supply route. If the humans were planning something there, very well. Activate full recording protocols. If she wants to talk, she can talk to all of High Command. The walk to her cell felt longer than usual. My tactical implants were running probability calculations, and none of them painted reassuring pictures. Humans had a documented history of turning capture into opportunity. But what opportunity could there be here? We were 16 levels underground. Our shields could deflect a star destroyer. Our security systems were designed by the finest military minds in the galaxy. Captain Mason was sitting cross-legged in the center of her cell when I arrived, looking for all the worlds like she was meditating. The quantum restraints should have been causing significant discomfort, but she showed no signs of distress. Commander Thek-9, she said without opening her eyes. Punctual. I appreciate that in an enemy. You wanted to talk, I growled, my translator rendering the words in their primitive language. So talk. She opened her eyes then, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Well, intelligence. Not the simple cunning of a predator, but the deep, calculating intelligence of a creature that saw patterns others missed. How many of your people know about the quantum cascade vulnerability in your shield generators? She asked conversationally. The question hit like a plasma bolt to the thorax. Quantum cascade vulnerabilities were theoretical, classified at the highest levels. There was no way a human could know about them. No possible way. I don't know what you are talking about, I managed, but my voice betrayed me. Her smile widened. Of course you don't. It's not like your people have been desperately trying to patch that particular weakness for the past 6 cycles. It's not like every major Zephyrian installation has been quietly upgrading their defensive systems. It's not like you have been losing sleep over whether humans might have figured out how to exploit it. Each word was a precision strike. How could she possibly know about our classified defensive upgrades? Our strategic vulnerabilities. The quantum cascade effect was known to perhaps a dozen individuals in the entire Zephyrian military hierarchy. You are fishing, I accused, though the words felt hollow. Am I? She stood up, the quantum restraints humming with energy as they tracked her movement. Tell me, Commander, when was the last time you ran a full diagnostic on your primary shield generators? The answer was 12 hours ago. Standard protocol demanded it. But I wasn't about to give her that information. Because, she continued, if I were a betting woman, and I am, I'd wager those diagnostics have been showing some interesting anomalies lately. Microfluctuations. Tiny variations in the harmonic frequency that your technicians probably dismissed as normal wear and tear. My secondary heart stopped beating. The diagnostics had shown exactly those anomalies. Our chief engineer, Vortha II, had assured me they were within acceptable parameters. Lucky guess, I said, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Want to try for another one? Her eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. Your communication array has been experiencing intermittent delays in quantum entanglement synchronization. Nothing major, just enough to create brief windows of transmission lag. Your people think it's cosmic interference from the nearby pulsar. It wasn't cosmic interference. I knew it wasn't cosmic interference, but we'd never been able to identify the actual source of the problem. How? The word escaped before I could stop it. Humans are very good at watching, she replied. We are also very good at waiting, and when we combine those two skills, she shrugged, the gesture somehow managing to look casual despite the restraints. Well, let's just say we learn things. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. If humans had been observing us, studying our defenses, learning our weaknesses, if this wasn't a failed infiltration but a successful intelligence operation. You came here to be captured, I realized. Took you long enough. She sat back down, getting comfortable. Though to be fair, you Zephyrians never were the brightest glowworms in the cosmic garden. The insult barely registered. My mind was racing through all the security protocols we'd followed, all the precautions we'd taken. Nothing should have allowed her to gather this kind of intelligence. Nothing. Unless the supply runs, I breathed. The routine supply runs to the outer settlements. You have been watching them. Among other things. Her tone suggested I was still missing the bigger picture. What do you want? I demanded. Want? She leaned back against the cell wall. Commander, I think you are still operating under the mistaken assumption that I'm your prisoner. The lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in blood-red radiance. Alarms began wailing throughout the facility. My tactical implants were screaming warnings about system failures, containment breaches, and something my translation matrix couldn't quite parse. Status report, I barked into my communicator. Static? Chicks 4 respond? More static. Captain Mason stood up again, and this time the quantum restraints simply turned off. They clattered to the floor like discarded jewelry. You see, Commander, she said, rolling her shoulders to work out the kinks. Humans have this wonderful saying about assuming things. It makes an ass out of you and me. Though in this case, I think you are carrying the full load. The cell door cycled open with a soft pneumatic hiss. Impossible, I whispered. The security systems are isolated. Quantum encrypted. No external signal can penetrate the facility's defenses. External signal. She stepped out of the cell and I instinctively backed away. Commander, who said anything about external signals? The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The supply runs, the routine maintenance crews, the carefully timed equipment upgrades. Humans hadn't been trying to break in from the outside. They'd been building their way in from the inside. How long? I asked. How long what? But her smile told me she knew exactly what I was asking. How long have your people been in my facility? Well, that depends on how you define your people versus my people. She started walking down the corridor, and I found myself following like some kind of trained animal. Maintenance technician Yorn 7, for instance. Lovely fellow. Been keeping your life support systems running perfectly for the past 8 months. Except Yorn 7 died in a transport accident 9 months ago. Took us a while to find someone who could pass for a Zephyrian. But human adaptability is truly remarkable. My legs felt unsteady. The medical exams. The genetic scans. Human biotechnology is advancing rapidly. She paused at an intersection, considering which direction to take. Though I have to say, your security screening is impressively thorough. It took considerable effort to develop synthetic Zephyrian cellular markers that could pass close inspection. How many? The question came out as a croak. How many what? How many of your people are actually my people? How many systems we have compromised? How many facilities we have infiltrated? She selected the left corridor, heading toward the command center. Or are you asking how many Zephyrian military installations are about to experience catastrophic system failures? The facility shuddered around us. Not the gentle vibration of normal operations, but a deep structural tremor that suggested something fundamental was going very wrong. This is insane, I protested. Even if you have compromised some systems, you can't possibly. What? She stopped walking and turned to face me. Commander, your people have been fighting humans for 3 years now. In all that time, have we ever done anything you thought we could possibly do? The Battle of Ragsajal.
7.
The impossible victory at Tau Ceti. The siege of New Damascus, where a single human battalion had somehow held off an entire Zephyrian war fleet. She had a point. But this, I gestured helplessly at the facility around us. This is our most secure installation. Our strategic command center. The heart of our forward operations. Yes, she agreed, it is. Or rather, it was. Another tremor, stronger this time. The lights flickered, and I could hear the distant sound of pressure seals engaging. Emergency protocols were activating throughout the facility. What did you do? I demanded. Me? Commander, I'm just a simple infantry captain. I wouldn't know how to sabotage a major military installation. Her expression was pure innocence. Though I suppose if someone wanted to cause problems, they might start by introducing subtle harmonic resonances into the primary shield generators. Nothing dramatic, just tiny frequency variations that would build over time. The quantum cascade vulnerability. She'd been talking about it from the beginning. The shield generators are the facility's foundation. I realized, if they fail, the whole installation comes down like a house of cards. She nodded approvingly. Very good, Commander. I was starting to worry about Zephyrian educational standards. The facility shook again, and this time I felt it in my bones. Structural supports were beginning to fail. We had minutes, maybe less. The evacuation protocols, I started, have been disabled, she finished. Along with the communication arrays, the transportation systems, and the automated distress beacons. Though I'm sure your people will figure out alternatives. Zephyrians are resourceful when properly motivated. You are going to kill everyone in the facility. The accusation came out stronger than I felt. Am I? She resumed walking, her pace unhurried despite the growing chaos around us. Commander, I'm a prisoner in quantum restraints in a maximum security cell. How could I possibly be responsible for any of this? Another section of corridor sealed itself behind us as we walked. The facility's automated systems were trying to contain what they perceived as a structural failure, but they were only making things worse. Where are we going? I asked. The command center, of course. Where else would a desperate prisoner take her captor during a facility-wide emergency? That made no sense. The command center would be the most heavily defended location in the installation. Even if her people had compromised some systems, surely the central command facility would still be secure. Wouldn't it? We reached the command center doors and they opened at our approach. No security challenge, no biometric scans, no quantum verification protocols. They just opened. The command center was in chaos. My staff was running between stations, trying to make sense of cascading system failures. Status displays showed red across the board. Communication with the orbital fleet was down, internal sensors were reporting impossible readings. And sitting in my command chair, feet up on the central console, was a human. Not just any human. This one was wearing a Zephyrian uniform with commander's insignia. My insignia? Captain Mason, the human called out cheerfully. Right on schedule. Any trouble with the extraction? None worth mentioning, Colonel Travis, Mason replied. Though I think Commander Thick 9 is starting to grasp the situation, Colonel Travis. I knew that name. The butcher of Kepler 18-6, the architect of the Vega system campaign. One of the most wanted war criminals in Zephyrian space. Extraction? I managed. Well, you didn't think Captain Mason came here just to chat, did you? Travis stood up from my chair and I noticed he was wearing my personal command codes on his wrist. The quantum-encrypted access keys that granted administrative control over the facility's primary systems. Those codes are biometrically locked, I protested. They can't function without my genetic signature. Can't they? Travis held up the device, and it pulsed with active authorization patterns. Human biotechnology really is remarkable, isn't it? Though I have to say, growing synthetic Zephyrian tissue samples from DNA traces is still more art than science. DNA traces. From where? How? The answer came with sickening clarity. The medical examinations. The routine health screenings. Every time I'd submitted to facility protocols, I'd been providing samples. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Planning what? Mason's voice carried that same infuriating innocence. Commander, surely you don't think we planned for your facility to suffer catastrophic structural failure during a routine prisoner interrogation. The facility gave another massive shudder, and several of my staff officers fell to their knees. Gravity generators were beginning to fluctuate. We were running out of time. Sir, one of my technicians called out, the primary evacuation routes are blocked. Secondary passages are sealed. We are trapped. Trapped? Travis looked genuinely surprised. That seems unlikely. Surely a facility this sophisticated would have multiple emergency egress options. He was mocking us. They were all mocking us. And the worst part was, they were doing it while systematically destroying everything we'd built. What do you want? I asked again, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew. Want? Mason exchanged a look with Travis. Commander, I think you are still not grasping the fundamental nature of our relationship here. Enlighten me. You are not our prisoner, Travis said patiently. We are not your prisoners. This isn't an interrogation or a rescue or a negotiation. Then what is it? Mason smiled, that terrifying smile again. It's a demonstration. The command center's main display flickered to life, showing the facility's external sensor feeds. The space around our installation was full of ships. Human ships. Dozens of them, arranged in perfect formation. Weapons powered but not targeted. A demonstration of what? I whispered. Of what happens, Travis said, when humans decide to stop playing by the rules. The facility's final structural supports gave way with a sound like the universe tearing. But instead of crushing collapse, instead of explosive decompression, the installation simply stopped, held in place by invisible forces, tractor beams. The human ships were holding the facility together. Impressive, isn't it? Mason commented. Took considerable coordination to time everything just right. Structural failure, tractor beam engagement, communication blackout. All synchronized to the microsecond. But why? I demanded. If you wanted to destroy the facility, why hold it together? If you wanted to capture it, why cause the failure in the first place? Because, Travis said, settling back into my command chair, we wanted you to understand something very important about humans. The display changed, showing strategic readouts I'd never seen before. Fleet positions, resource allocations, deployment schedules, classified Zephyrian military intelligence. We don't just win battles, Mason continued. We don't just capture facilities or destroy fleets or conquer territory. We fundamentally change the nature of the conflict itself. Your entire forward command structure has been compromised for months, Travis added. Every order you have given, every strategy you have developed, every classified communication you have sent, we have been watching, learning, planning. The scope of it was staggering. If they were telling the truth, if humans had really infiltrated our command structure this thoroughly, the war, I breathed, is over, Mason confirmed. Your people just don't know it yet. Another display activated, showing Zephyrian installations throughout the sector. One by one, their status indicators were changing from green to red. Facility compromised. Communications down. Structural failure imminent. This is happening everywhere? I asked. Simultaneously, Travis nodded. Coordinated across 17 star systems. Your entire forward operational capacity is being neutralized as we speak. But the orbital fleets, the battle cruisers, surely they can what? Mason pulled up another display. Can fight an enemy they can't locate, can coordinate without functional command centers, can supply themselves without operational bases. The human ships outside began moving, but not in attack formations. They were deploying in support positions, ready to assist with evacuation and rescue operations. You are not even going to fight us, I realized. Fight you? Travis looked genuinely puzzled. Commander, why would we fight you? You are beaten. Your strategic capability is gone. Your command structure is compromised. Your forward positions are neutralized. Fighting at this point would just be wasteful. Besides, Mason added, humans prefer our enemies alive. Dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes. The facility's artificial gravity stabilized as the human tractor beams fully engaged. Life support systems came back online. Communication arrays began functioning again, though they were now routing through human relay stations. So what happens now? I asked. Now? Travis stood up again, and I noticed he was removing my command codes from his wrist. Now you get to make a choice. What kind of choice? Mason stepped forward, holding out a small device, a communication unit of some kind. You can contact High Command, she said. Tell them what happened here. Explain how thoroughly you have been outmaneuvered. Recommend immediate cessation of hostilities and the opening of surrender negotiations. Or I asked, though I suspected I knew. Or Travis shrugged, your people can keep fighting. Keep throwing ships and soldiers at an enemy that's already inside their defensive perimeter. Keep believing they can win a war that's already over. And if we choose to keep fighting, then you keep fighting, Mason replied, simply, and we keep winning. And eventually, when enough of your people have died pointlessly, someone else will make the call to surrender. The communication unit felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Why are you giving me this choice? I asked. Why not just finish it? Because, Mason said, humans believe in giving their enemies the chance to do the smart thing. Even after everything? After years of war? After all the death and destruction? Especially after all that, Travis replied. Wars end, Commander. The question is whether they end with wisdom or with extinction. I looked at the communication unit, then at the displays showing the scope of human infiltration throughout our military structure. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. It was an acknowledgement of reality. And if I make this call, I said slowly, if I recommend surrender, what guarantee do I have that humans will honor the terms? None, Mason admitted. But then what guarantee did you have that we wouldn't simply destroy every Zephyrian installation in the sector without warning? What guarantee did you have, Travis added, that we wouldn't turn this war into a campaign of extermination? What guarantee, Mason concluded, do you have that the next group of humans you encounter will be as reasonable as we are? The implications sent ice through my veins. If humans could do this, if they could infiltrate and neutralize our defenses this completely, what else might they be capable of? How long do I have to decide? I asked. How long do you need? Travis replied. Your people are dying out there, Commander. Every minute you delay, more ships are lost. More soldiers are killed. More families are destroyed. But ultimately, Mason added, the decision is yours. We won't force you to surrender. We won't threaten you or your people if you choose to keep fighting. We will just keep being human. And somehow that was the most terrifying thing they could have said. The communication unit activated with a soft chime, connecting me directly to High Command. In moments I would be speaking with the Supreme Military Council, explaining the inexplicable, reporting the impossible. Commander Thicky 9 came the familiar voice of Fleet Admiral Zorsk Prime. Report your status. We are showing massive system failures throughout your sector. I looked at Mason and Travis, both of whom had stepped back to give me privacy for the call. They weren't listening in, weren't monitoring the conversation. They were simply, "Wait, Admiral," I began, my voice steadier than I had any right to expect. "I need to report a complete strategic compromise of our forward operations." As I spoke, explaining the scope of human infiltration and the reality of our situation, I watched Mason and Travis through the transparent aluminum viewing port. They weren't gloating, weren't celebrating their victory. They looked tired, sad, even like warriors who had won a battle they wished they hadn't needed to fight. The facility around us continued its controlled descent towards stability, held together by human technology and human mercy. Outside, the human fleet maintained its protective formation, ready to assist with evacuation if needed, ready to withdraw if requested. They had beaten us completely, utterly, without firing a shot, and now they were waiting patiently for us to accept reality. It was, I realized, the most human thing they could possibly do. Fleet Admiral Zorn's prime silence stretched across the quantum communication link like a death shroud. I had just finished explaining how our most secure military installation had been compromised by maintenance workers, supply crews, and medical technicians who weren't who they claimed to be. How humans had spent months systematically undermining our defenses from within. How our entire forward command structure was currently being held together by enemy tractor beams. "Repeat that last part," Zorex Prime finally said, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded either brilliant strategy or complete mental breakdown. "Sir, the humans are offering negotiated surrender. They claim simultaneous operations are underway at 17 installations across the sector. Our strategic capacity has been neutralized." Another pause. In the background, I could hear the controlled chaos of high command scrambling to verify my report. Status requests flying across subspace. Emergency protocols activating. The sound of an empire realizing it was already dead. "Commander Thick-9," Zorex Prime said slowly, "are you currently under duress? Are the humans forcing you to make this report?" I looked through the viewing port at Captain Mason and Colonel Travis, who were examining a wall display with the casual interest of tourists reading historical markers. They had stepped away from the communication station entirely, giving me complete privacy for what might be the most important conversation in Zephyrian military history. "No, sir," I replied. "They are not even listening." "Not listening?" Zorex Prime's voice climbed an octave. "Commander, you are reporting the complete compromise of our forward operations, and the enemy isn't even monitoring your communications." "Sir, I don't think they need to monitor anything. They already know what we are going to decide." Because that was the truly terrifying part. Humans hadn't just outmaneuvered us tactically. They had outthought us strategically. They knew our doctrine better than we did. They understood our decision-making processes, our command structure, our psychological profiles. They had wargamed this scenario so thoroughly that they could predict our responses before we made them. "Stand by, Commander," Zorex Prime said, and the line went quiet. I set down the communication unit and walked over to where Mason and Travis were studying what appeared to be personnel records. Our personnel records, complete with psychological evaluations, family histories, and personal weaknesses. "Enjoying some light reading?" I asked. "Professional curiosity," Travis replied without looking up. "Your people do very thorough background checks, though I notice you tend to overlook certain patterns." "What kind of patterns?" Mason glanced at me with something that might have been pity. "Commander, in the past 18 months, how many of your maintenance staff have died in transport accidents?" The question hit like ice water. "I don't see how that's relevant." "Humor me." I accessed my tactical implants, pulling up personnel casualty reports. The number was higher than expected. Significantly higher. 17, I said slowly. "And how many replacement workers were brought in during that same period?" 18. The word came out as a whisper. "One extra," Travis noted. "Just to be safe. Wouldn't want the facility understaffed as during a critical operation." The scope of the deception was staggering. Not just infiltration, but systematic replacement. They hadn't snuck people in. They had become us. How? I demanded. The genetic scans, the biometric locks, the quantum signature verification. Our security protocols are specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of infiltration. Are they? Mason pulled up another file. Tell me, Commander, when was the last time your security protocols were updated? I knew the answer. Major Revision 7.3 implemented 8 months ago. Enhanced biometric scanning, improved quantum encryption, expanded genetic verification matrices. 8 months ago, I said. And who recommended those specific upgrades? The answer was in the file she was showing me. Security Chief Vorth 2, based on intelligence reports about human infiltration capabilities discovered during the investigation of suspicious activities at the Ragel 7 outpost. Intelligence reports that I was beginning to realize might have been provided by humans themselves. You fed us the security upgrades, I breathed. We suggested some improvements, Travis corrected. Your people designed and implemented them entirely on their own initiative. But the upgrades were specifically designed to counter your infiltration methods. Were they? Mason's smile was sharp as a plasma blade. Or were they designed to counter the infiltration methods we wanted you to think we were using? The communication unit chimed again. Commander, Tekanine, you are needed immediately. I picked up the device, my hands shaking slightly. Yes, Admiral. We have confirmed your report, Zorx Prime said, his voice hollow. 14 installations are reporting similar situations. Prometheus Base has gone completely dark. The Titan shipyards are showing structural failures across all primary construction bays. Sir, the humans are offering terms. The humans? Zorx Prime interrupted, have effectively decapitated our entire forward command structure in a single coordinated strike. They have demonstrated capabilities we didn't know existed. They have shown tactical planning that exceeds our best strategic projections. Yes, sir. And they want to negotiate. Yes, sir. Another long pause. Put me through to their commander. I looked at Travis, who nodded and walked over to the communications station. Admiral Zorx Prime, Travis said, settling into the chair with easy confidence. I'm Colonel Marcus Travis, Human Expeditionary Force. I understand you'd like to discuss terms, Colonel. Zorx Prime's voice was carefully controlled. I want to understand what just happened to my forces. What happened, Travis replied, is that humans got tired of fighting a war of attrition, so we decided to fight a war of information instead. Information warfare doesn't explain structural failures. It doesn't explain compromised quantum encryption. It doesn't explain how you have managed to simultaneously neutralize installations across 17 star systems, doesn't it? Travis leaned back in the chair. Admiral, what's the first rule of information warfare? Control the flow of intelligence. Wrong, Mason interjected, joining the conversation. The first rule is to make your enemy's intelligence work for you. Explain. Travis pulled up a holographic display showing Zephyrian military communication networks. Lines of data flow pulsed between installations, carrying orders, reports, and strategic updates. Every piece of intelligence your people gathered about human capabilities. Travis said, every security upgrade you implemented, every countermeasure you developed, you shared it with your entire command network. Standard military protocol. Zorx Prime replied stiffly. Absolutely, Mason agreed. And very convenient for us. Because once we had people inside your maintenance and technical support structures, we had access to every security update, every protocol change, every tactical adjustment you made. You turned our own security improvements against us. We turned your security improvements into our operational intelligence, Travis corrected. Every time you upgraded your defenses, you told us exactly what you thought we were capable of. And more importantly, you told us what you thought we weren't capable of. The display changed, showing a timeline of Zephyrian security upgrades over the past year. Each improvement was highlighted, along with corresponding human operational adjustments. Biometric scanning upgrade, Mason read from the timeline. Implemented to counter suspected human shape-shifting technology. Except humans don't have shape-shifting technology. Enhanced quantum encryption, Travis continued. Designed to prevent human quantum infiltration systems, which also don't exist. Expanded genetic verification matrices, Mason added. Built to detect human genetic camouflage techniques. Still waiting for humans to develop those. But you said, I started, then stopped. The synthetic tissue samples, the DNA matching. Oh, that's real, Travis confirmed. But it's much simpler than you think. We don't change our genetics to match yours. We just borrow some of yours. Medical waste, Mason explained, helpfully. Tissue samples from routine examinations. Shed skin cells. Hair follicles. You'd be amazed what people leave behind without thinking about it. And once we had biological samples, Travis said, growing synthetic matching tissue was just a matter of standard human biotechnology. Nothing exotic. Nothing that required advanced shape-shifting or genetic manipulation. Just good old-fashioned biological engineering. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. They hadn't overcome our security through superior technology. They had bypassed it through superior understanding. So every security upgrade we implemented, Zorx Prime's voice trailed off, made it easier for us to blend in, Mason finished. Because you were defending against capabilities we didn't have while ignoring the capabilities we did have. Which are? I asked. Patience, Travis said simply. Planning, and the ability to think like our enemies. The communication link went quiet for several minutes. I could imagine what was happening at high command. Strategic assessments being rewritten. Tactical doctrines being questioned. The fundamental assumptions of Zephyrian military superiority being examined and found wanting. What are your terms? Zorx Prime finally asked. Immediate cessation of hostilities, Travis replied. Withdrawal of all Zephyrian forces from disputed territories. Establishment of a neutral zone pending formal peace negotiations. And in return, no further human military operations against Zephyrian targets. No pursuit of retreating forces. No exploitation of our current tactical advantages. Zorx Prime's voice carried a note of dark humor. Colonel, you have just demonstrated that you can neutralize our entire command structure at will. What possible advantage could we have in negotiation? The advantage, Mason said quietly, of dealing with humans who prefer negotiation to extermination. The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise combined. Because it was true, if humans had wanted to simply destroy us, they clearly had the capability. The fact that they were offering terms instead of annihilation was significant. How do we know this isn't just another deception? Zorx Prime asked. How do we know you won't simply use the ceasefire to position for another attack? You don't, Travis admitted. But Admiral, consider the alternative. You can keep fighting a war you have already lost, or you can negotiate with an enemy who's offering you the chance to survive defeat with dignity. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight to the end, then you fight to the end, Mason replied. And eventually there won't be enough of you left to surrender. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of mathematical fact. If humans could do this once, they could do it again and again, until there was nothing left of Zephyrian military capacity. I need to consult with the Supreme Military Council, Zorx Prime said. Of course, Travis replied. You have 12 hours. 12 hours? Admiral? While we are talking, your people are dying. Ships are being destroyed. Installations are failing. Every hour you delay, the casualty count rises. We'd prefer to minimize unnecessary loss of life. Understood. The line went quiet again. I looked around the command center, which was now functioning normally despite the catastrophic structural failure that had nearly destroyed it 20 minutes earlier. Human engineers were working alongside my technical staff, coordinating repairs with casual efficiency. No weapons, no guard, no signs of occupation or conquest. Just professionals doing their jobs. This is really happening, I said. Not quite a question. This is really happening, Mason confirmed. And you planned all of this. The infiltration, the simultaneous strikes, the coordinated operations across multiple systems. We planned for the possibility, Travis replied. Humans are very good at contingency planning. How many contingencies did you plan for? This was contingency plan number 47, Mason said matter-of-factly. 47. I stared at her. What were the other 46? Various combinations of military, political, economic, and diplomatic approaches to ending the war, Travis explained. This particular scenario was actually one of our less preferred options. Less preferred? We'd rather have negotiated a peace settlement 18 months ago, Mason said. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. But you were losing the war 18 months ago. Were we? Travis pulled up another display. This one showing casualty statistics and resource expenditures over the past 3 years. Admiral, wars aren't won by who kills the most enemies. They are won by who achieves their strategic objectives. And your strategic objectives were peace with the Zephyrian Empire on terms that prevent future conflicts, Mason replied. Preferably without having to demonstrate why continuing the war would be a bad idea for everyone involved. So this entire operation was a demonstration, Travis finished. A proof of concept. A way of showing your leadership that continuing hostilities would be counterproductive. The communication unit chimed again. Commander, the K-9, patch me through to Colonel Travis. Admiral, Travis said, accepting the connection. Colonel, I have spoken with the Supreme Military Council. We are prepared to accept your terms with one condition. Name it? We want guarantees. Formal agreements that this capability won't be used against civilian targets or non-military installations. Admiral, Travis said seriously, humans don't make war on civilians. We never have. We never will. How can we trust that? Because, Mason interjected, if we'd wanted to target civilians, we would have started with your population centers instead of your military bases. Because, Travis added, humans understand the difference between winning a war and committing genocide. Because, I found myself saying, surprising everyone including myself, in the past 3 hours they have had complete control over a facility containing 3,000 military personnel, and they have killed exactly 0 of them. Zork's Prime was quiet for a moment. Commander Thicksack whined, do you recommend acceptance of these terms? Did I? I looked around the command center again. At human and Zephyrian personnel working together to repair systems that humans had broken in order to make a point. At Mason and Travis, who had orchestrated the most successful military operation in recorded history and were now patiently waiting for their enemies to make the sensible decision. At the displays showing Zephyrian installations across the sector, where the same scene was playing out. Structural failures that weren't quite failures. System compromises that weren't quite sabotage. Demonstrations of power that weren't quite attack. Yes, sir, I said. I recommend acceptance. Very well, Colonel Travis. On behalf of the Zephyrian Empire, I accept your terms. Immediate ceasefire, withdrawal of forces, establishment of neutral zones pending formal negotiations. Acknowledged, Admiral. Human forces will begin standing down within the hour. We will transmit coordinates for neutral zone boundaries and protocols for prisoner exchanges. Prisoner exchanges? You will want your people back, Mason said simply. The ones we have been holding in protective custody during the operation. Protective custody, Admiral Travis explained patiently. When you are infiltrating someone's command structure, you occasionally have to relocate the people you are replacing. Temporarily, they are alive, they are unharmed, and they are probably going to have some very interesting stories to tell, Mason replied. Though I suspect some of them might need psychological counseling, finding out your entire career has been compromised by enemy agents can be traumatic. The line went quiet again, and I realized Zorp's Prime was probably dealing with the implications of that revelation. How many of our people had been replaced? How long had humans been operating inside our command structure? How much of our strategic planning had been observed, analyzed, and countered before we'd even implemented it? Admiral Travis said gently, the war is over. Your people are safe. Our people are safe. Everything else is just paperwork. Colonel, why? Why offer these terms? Why not simply demand unconditional surrender? Because, Mason replied, humans prefer their former enemies to be future allies rather than future insurgents. Because, Travis added, we are not interested in ruling the galaxy. We are interested in being left alone to explore it. Because, I said, understanding finally dawning, Humans fight wars to end wars, not to start empires. Now you are getting it, Mason smiled. Commander, you might have a future in human-Zephyrian diplomatic relations. The facility shuddered slightly as the human tractor beams began disengaging. External displays showed the human fleet moving into withdrawal formation, though they maintained defensive positions around the installation. Colonel, Sorvax Prime said. One more question. Yes, Admiral. How long have you been planning this particular operation? Travis and Mason exchanged a look. Since the war started, Travis replied. Admiral, humans don't just plan to win conflicts. We plan to end them. And as the human ships began their withdrawal, leaving behind a Zephyrian installation that was somehow more secure and better functioning than it had been before they'd arrived, I began to understand what we had really been fighting. Not an enemy. A teacher. A very patient, very thorough teacher who had just given the Zephyrian Empire the most expensive lesson in military strategy in galactic history. The war was over. The real question was whether we had learned enough to avoid needing another one. 6 months after the surrender, I found myself standing in the same command center where humanity had redefined the concept of warfare. The room looked identical, functioned perfectly, and felt completely different. Every surface, every system, every protocol had been touched by human hands, not conquered, not destroyed, improved. Captain Yara Mason sat across from me at the conference table, reviewing prisoner exchange reports with the same methodical precision she'd used to dismantle our military supremacy. Colonel Marcus Travis was examining tactical displays showing the new neutral zone boundaries. Both wore Zephyrian diplomatic insignia alongside their human rank designations. Joint Oversight Committee. That's what they called this arrangement. I called it the most sophisticated form of psychological warfare ever devised. The last group of replacement personnel returned home yesterday, Mason reported without looking up from her datapad. Maintenance Chief Vorth 2 is requesting extended medical leave. Apparently, discovering that your entire career was observed by enemy operatives has some lasting effects. How many did you replace in total? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Across all 17 installations. Travis consulted his own records. 247 personnel, engineers, technicians, medical staff, communications operators. Never anyone in direct command positions. Why not? Because, Mason explained, replacing commanders would have required us to make strategic decisions for your military. That would have been conquest, not infiltration. The distinction mattered to them. Humans, I had learned, were obsessed with maintaining ethical boundaries even while systematically demolishing their enemies. They had rules for everything, including how thoroughly they were allowed to defeat someone. The psychological evaluations are concerning, I continued, referring to the reports on our returned personnel. 40% are requesting transfers to civilian positions. 20% are experiencing what your medical teams call existential displacement syndrome. They will recover, Travis said with surprising gentleness. Humans have been through similar experiences. The key is helping them understand they weren't failures. They were professionals doing their jobs against an opponent who was playing by different rules. Different rules. That was the human specialty. They didn't break the laws of physics or violate the principles of military strategy. They simply ignored the assumptions everyone else made about how those principles should be applied. Speaking of different rules, I said, I have been reviewing the technical specifications on your infiltration equipment. The synthetic tissue generators, the quantum signature mimics, the genetic pattern replicators. And, Mason finally looked up from her reports. And none of it is particularly advanced. By galactic standards, it's actually rather primitive. That's because it is primitive, Travis agreed. Admiral, we didn't defeat you with superior technology. We defeated you with superior thinking. Explain. Mason activated a holographic display showing the operational timeline of their infiltration. Every major military power in the galaxy focuses on developing countermeasures for exotic threats, shapeshifters, quantum infiltrators, genetic camouflage specialists, psychic manipulators, none of which humans actually are, I noted. Exactly. So while everyone was building defenses against imaginary super soldiers, we were perfecting the art of being invisible maintenance workers. The displays showed incident reports from the past year, equipment malfunctions that weren't quite malfunctions, supply delays that weren't quite delays, communication glitches that weren't quite glitches. Hundreds of minor problems that individually meant nothing. You sabotaged us so slowly we didn't notice. We didn't sabotage anything, Travis corrected. We optimized your systems for our purposes. There's a difference. What kind of difference? Sabotage is destructive, Mason explained. It breaks things, creates obvious problems, triggers security investigations, optimizes and improves performance while introducing useful features. Useful to whom? Well, that depends on your perspective. The display changed to show system performance metrics over the past 18 months. Efficiency ratings, maintenance schedules, error rates, operational readiness indices, everything had improved steadily over time. You made our systems work better while compromising them, I realized. We made your systems work better by compromising them, Travis corrected. The improvements weren't incidental. They were integral to the operation. How is that possible? Mason pulled up technical schematics showing modifications to power distribution networks, communication arrays, and structural support systems. Each change was highlighted in different colors: green for performance improvements, blue for new features, red for operational vulnerabilities. Every system has inefficiencies, she explained. Redundant processes, unnecessary bottlenecks, suboptimal resource allocation. When you eliminate those problems, you create space for new capabilities. New capabilities that happen to include remote shutdown commands. Among other things, Travis confirmed, though we prefer to think of them as administrative access protocols. Administrative access protocols that you use to disable our entire command structure. We used them to demonstrate the vulnerability of your command structure, Mason corrected. There's an important distinction. I was beginning to understand that humans made a lot of important distinctions. The difference between conquest and demonstration, between sabotage and optimization, between defeating an enemy and educating them. The Supreme Military Council wants to know about your other contingency plans, I said, changing the subject to something that had been bothering me for months. What about them? Travis asked. You said this operation was Plan 47. What were the other 46? Various approaches to ending the conflict without this level of dramatic intervention, such as Mason and Travis exchanged one of their looks. Over the past 6 months I had learned to recognize different categories of human looks. This one meant they were deciding how much truth I could handle. Economic warfare, Mason said finally. Disrupting your supply chains, introducing market instabilities, creating resource shortages that would make continued military operations financially unsustainable. Political manipulation, Travis added. Supporting opposition factions within your government. Encouraging internal debates about the war's strategic value. Promoting leadership changes that might favor negotiation. Cultural infiltration. Information warfare. Diplomatic isolation. Trade embargo coordination. Mason was ticking off options on her fingers. Targeted infrastructure disruption. Strategic resource interdiction. Selective. Military engagement designed to demonstrate capability without major casualties. And if all of those had failed, another look between them. This one carried darker implications. Plan 48, Travis said quietly, involved relocating the entire human population to a different galaxy and leaving behind some very unpleasant surprises for anyone who tried to follow us. The casual way he said it made my blood freeze. You would have abandoned this entire galactic cluster? Humans are nomadic by nature, Mason explained. We have been preparing for strategic relocation since we achieved interstellar travel. The infrastructure is already in place, but the expense, the logistics, the technological challenges are all manageable, Travis finished. Admiral, never assume that what humans are willing to do is limited by what seems practical to other species. The implications were staggering. If humans could evacuate their entire civilization on short notice, if they had the capability to establish themselves in other galaxies, if they were prepared to abandon everything rather than submit to conquest, You are not refugees, I said, understanding flooding through me. You never were. You are explorers who happen to be passing through. Now you are getting it, Mason smiled that terrifying smile again. Commander, humans didn't come to this galaxy to build an empire. We came here to see what was interesting. Turns out not much, except for the war. Except for the war, Travis agreed, which was moderately educational. But we are hoping the peace will be more intellectually stimulating. A communication alert chimed through the facility. Commander Thex-9 Admiral Zorx Prime is requesting a priority conference with the Joint Oversight Committee. I activated the communication array and the familiar form of Fleet Admiral Zorx Prime materialized in holographic projection. Over the past 6 months, he had aged considerably. The stress of rebuilding a military that had discovered it had never been as secure as it thought was taking its toll. Admiral, I acknowledged. Colonel Travis and Captain Mason are here. Good. We have a situation developing in the Kepler-42 system. Long-range sensors are detecting an unknown fleet approaching the neutral zone boundaries. Travis and Mason immediately focused on their displays, calling up sensor data and threat assessments with practiced efficiency. Configuration analysis suggests hegemony vessels. Zorx Prime continued. Approximately 50 ships, including at least 3 Dreadnought-class battlecruisers. The hegemony. Our former allies, now apparently former allies. The third major power in this region of the galaxy and the one faction that had refused to acknowledge the human Zephyrian ceasefire. Estimated time to neutral zone boundary? Mason asked. 18 hours at current velocity, Zorx Prime replied. Admiral, under the terms of our agreement, Zephyrian forces are not permitted to engage targets in the neutral zone. Nor are human forces, Travis noted. Interesting timing. You think this is coordinated? I asked. I think, Mason said, studying the sensor readouts, that someone has been watching our little peace process with considerable interest. And decided they don't like the precedent it sets, Travis added. The display updated with additional sensor data. The hegemony fleet was indeed substantial. More importantly, their trajectory would bring them directly through the neutral zone and toward human-controlled space. Admiral, Travis said to Zorx Prime, have you attempted to communicate with the hegemony fleet? We have. They are not responding to hails. Standard military protocol would be to treat this as a hostile approach. Standard military protocol, Mason observed, is what got us all into this mess in the first place. Do you have a recommendation? Zorx Prime asked. Travis and Mason exchanged another look. This one was different from the others I had observed. Less consultation than confirmation. As if they were verifying something they had already decided. We have a recommendation, Travis said. But you are not going to like it. Try me. Let them come, Mason said simply. The silence that followed was profound. Zorx Prime's holographic image flickered slightly, suggesting he was dealing with some internal emotional processing. Excuse me? He finally managed. Let them come, Travis repeated. Let them enter the neutral zone. Let them approach human space. Let them do whatever they came here to do. Colonel, 50 hegemony warships are about to receive a demonstration of why picking fights with humans is counterproductive, Mason finished. You are going to fight them. We are going to educate them, Travis corrected. There's a difference. I realized I was holding my breath. Another contingency plan number 12, Mason confirmed. Though we were hoping we wouldn't need it so soon. What does Plan 12 involve? Zorx Prime asked. Though his tone suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know, Admiral Travis said gently. Over the past 6 months, what have you learned about human military capabilities? That they are far more extensive than we previously understood. And what have you learned about human strategic thinking? That it operates on timescales and complexity levels that exceed standard military doctrine. And what have you learned about human conflict resolution preferences? Zorx Prime was quiet for a moment. That humans prefer to end conflicts permanently rather than simply winning them temporarily. Exactly, Mason nodded approvingly. So when 50 hegemony warships show up in neutral space, apparently intent on disrupting our peaceful resolution of the human-Zephyrian conflict, what do you think humans are likely to do? The answer came to me with crystal clarity. You are going to solve the hegemony problem the same way you solved the Zephyrian problem. We are going to offer the hegemony the same educational opportunities we offered you, Travis said diplomatically. Whether they want them or not, Mason added with that smile. And if they refuse to learn, then they refuse to learn, Travis shrugged. But Admiral, in our experience, most species become much more receptive to education after appropriate demonstrations of the alternative. The communication array chimed again with an incoming priority signal. Admiral Zorix Prime, we are receiving a transmission from the approaching fleet. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show a new figure. Tall, arthropod-like with the distinctive carapace markings of hegemony military leadership. Admiral Crix 8, if I remembered correctly, a hardliner who had opposed every peace initiative in the region. Admiral Zorix Prime Crix 8's translator rendered his clicking speech into standard Galactic. I am here to discuss the unacceptable terms of your surrender to human forces. Admiral Crix 8, Zorix Prime replied carefully. The Zephyrian Empire and human forces have negotiated a mutually acceptable ceasefire. I'm not sure what discussion you believe is necessary. The discussion, Crix 8 clicked ominously, of how to reverse this catastrophic precedent before it spreads to other conflicts. Other conflicts? Travis asked, speaking for the first time. Crix 8's attention shifted to the human colonel, and I saw something flicker across the hegemony admiral's features. Recognition, perhaps? Or concern? Colonel Travis, Crix 8 acknowledged. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Admiral. Though I confess I'm curious about your presence in neutral space, I'm here to offer the Zephyrian Empire an alternative to submission. Submission? Mason's voice carried dangerous amusement. Admiral, I think you may have misunderstood the nature of our arrangement. Have I? You defeated Zephyrian forces without a proper battle. You negotiated surrender without conquest. You established precedents that make traditional military conflict appear obsolete. Korvax 8's translator was struggling with the emotional undertones of his speech. This cannot be allowed to stand. Cannot be allowed by whom? Travis asked politely. By those who understand that strength must be earned through victory, not negotiated through cleverness. I found myself leaning forward, fascinated despite the growing tension. Admiral Crix 8, are you suggesting that peaceful resolution of conflicts is somehow wrong? I am suggesting that it is weak, that it encourages other inferior species to believe they can negotiate with their superiors rather than submitting to them. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Mason and Travis were studying the hegemony admiral with the intense focus of scientists examining an interesting specimen. Admiral Travis said finally, are you familiar with human military doctrine regarding unprovoked aggression? I am familiar with human weakness, Crix 8 replied. Your species talks when it should fight, negotiates when it should conquer, shows mercy when it should demonstrate dominance. Interesting perspective, Mason observed. And you believe this weakness makes humans suitable targets for correction. I believe this weakness makes humans suitable targets for elimination. The temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees. Travis and Mason exchanged one more look, and this time I recognized the expression immediately. It was the look of teachers whose patience had just run out. Admiral Crix 8, Travis said, his voice carrying a new quality I hadn't heard before. You have 18 hours to reconsider your position and withdraw from neutral space. Or what, human? Or, Mason replied, standing up from the conference table, you discover why we prefer negotiation to the alternatives. You threaten me? With what? 50 ships against your token forces. Admiral Travis also stood, and suddenly the command center felt much smaller. We are not threatening you. We are educating you. There's a difference. Explain the difference. A threat tells you what we might do, Mason replied, walking toward the communication array. Education shows you what we can do, and Admiral. She leaned into the transmission pickup, her smile visible to the hegemony fleet commander. Your education begins now. The lights went out again, but this time, they went out across the entire star system. Every hegemony ship, every monitoring station, every communication relay, every navigation beacon, Every artificial source of illumination in the Kepler-4 system simply stopped functioning. 18 hours, Admiral Travis said into the darkness. Use them wisely. When the lights came back on 30 seconds later, the Hegemony fleet was spinning helplessly in space, their engines dead, their weapons offline, their communication systems broadcasting nothing but static. How? Zorix Prime whispered. Contingency Plan Number 12, Mason replied, settling back into her chair. Also known as why humans prefer to solve problems with words instead of demonstrations. You disabled 50 warships simultaneously. We disabled 50 warships temporarily, Travis corrected. Their systems will come back online in 17 hours and 57 minutes. Whether Admiral Crixate chooses to use that time for reflection or for preparing a more aggressive approach, well, that's his decision. And if he chooses aggression, Mason's smile returned, sharper than ever. Then he gets to find out what contingency plan number 11 looks like. Which is something, Travis said quietly, that doesn't involve temporary system shutdowns. I realized that humans had just demonstrated their second rule of warfare. First, show your enemies that you can defeat them without trying. Then show them that defeat was the gentle option. Admiral Crix, 8. Zorix Prime called into the communication array. Do you wish to reconsider your position? Static was the only response. 17 hours and 56 minutes, Mason noted, checking her chronometer. Think he will learn? I asked. Most species do, Travis replied. Eventually, and if he doesn't, then the galaxy gets a demonstration of why humans really truly prefer negotiation to conquest. As I watched the disabled Hegemony fleet spinning helplessly in space, held in place by invisible human technology, I realized something that should have terrified me. Humans weren't just the most dangerous species in the galaxy because of what they could do. They were the most dangerous because of how much restraint they showed in not doing it. The war was over. The peace was holding. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, 50 Hegemony admirals were learning the same lesson the Zephyrian Empire had learned 6 months ago. When humans offer you terms, you take them. Because the alternative isn't defeat, it's education. And nobody wants that much education. The communication array chimed one final time. Admiral Crixate's voice emerged from the static considerably less confident than before. Colonel Travis, perhaps we should discuss terms. Excellent idea, Admiral Travis replied pleasantly. Captain Mason will be happy to explain our standard educational package. Mason's smile could have powered a small star. Class is now in session, she said. And in the depths of space, 50 Hegemony warships learned why humans had a perfect record in teaching galactic powers about the benefits of peaceful coexistence. Whether they wanted to learn or not, the galaxy was becoming a much more educational place. And that, I realized, was exactly how humans preferred it.